Hello, everyone. Today, we are going to discuss domestic and regional implications of the failed coup attempt in Turkey in the year 2016, which was a very critical and unprecedented event in Turkey's history. And I think it has a lot of implications for the region as well, and maybe for the global balance of power. And we have several speakers with us to tackle this major issue, and we hope that this discussion will provide useful, insightful ideas and also opinions and knowledge about what really happened at that night. And as an academician, when I just heard that the news there is an attempt for coup, I personally also took, as a political scientist, I took a personal stance that I tweeted that we should go to the streets and defend our democracy. And we went out with our family, with our kids, 2 boys and my wife. And we seen that people, from the helicopters, they attack on people, and there was also tanks that crushed people, and many other issues that we want to listen today. So we have speakers from different parts of the world, Turkish and non-Turkish. And I want to start with Ibrahim Bey. He is also Ibrahim Karataş. He is also an academician, and Dr. Ibrahim, and many others also follow the developments. But let's start. What happened? Actually, what is the nature of this coup that's different from others? Mr. Ibrahim, Dr. Ibrahim, welcome, and I welcome all the other speakers and listeners and participants. Later on, we will take questions from the audience. Dr. Ibrahim, please go ahead. You hear me?
Do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you now. Please go ahead.
Okay, then my microphone has problems. Okay. Thanks for allowing me to speak here. First of all, the difference between other coups is that in the past there were coups perpetrated by soldiers with no affiliation to any religious groups. Actually, in my speech, I will deny that FETÖ is a religious group, but at least people suppose that group as a religious group. So when people differentiate coups from each other, particularly July 15 from others, they see it as the coup of a religious congregation. But it isn't. Maybe other speakers can talk about that. I want to focus mainly on how FETÖ damaged religion, actually, because people call it a religious congregation, but it maybe damaged religion more than anything else. Let me explain with my ideas how it hurt our religion and our society. Maybe I can also accept questions about that. You know that 5 years have passed since FETÖ attempt this famous military coup. Alhamdulillah, they failed and peace prevailed in our country. the state, Turkish army and other state institutions are stronger and functional more than ever. I guess that other participants will talk about political repercussions. So I want to, as I said, talk about the religious aspect, because we know that FETÖ came to the scan as a religious congregation or Jamaat in Turkish in 1970s. Many people assumed them as pious, decent, and patriot people that spread Islam and Turkish soft power all over the world. So therefore, when they asked money from people as zakat, as kurbani for slaughtering, both in Turkey and in other countries, or when they asked fiscal help, people paid them with no hesitation because they thought that it is a religious congregation. But we know that their agenda was quite different. Maybe some of us were indeed aware of the contradictions and in their behaviors and actions, but many of us also ignored their hidden agenda. For instance, they were known as pious people, but we know that few of them were worshipping. Also, Fethullah Gülen was continuously lying. Personally, that is what took my attention, especially when I was at high school and at university. When asked followers about these so much lies, they were responding as such that Hoca Efendi is doing everything for Muslim Ummah. However, these so-called preachers' real intentions became apparent in the course of time. Before the coup or before AK Party came to power, actually, FETÖ already had revealed its real face, because we remember that during February 28 process, FETÖ distanced itself from other groups and supported junta to topple down then Prime Minister Erbakan. He also once said some words about his scarf, saying that it is just a small detail in religion, and it took fury of people, but later it was ignored. We know that he also, his group, as FETÖ, also launched intercultural dialogue, but it was just to deceive Christians and Jews.
And other introduction, people. Yes, it's a good point, and we want to listen to. We want to admit Dr. Ali Demirtaş. He just fall from the. He need to accept. Dr. Ali, accept the invitation or the mic, please. And as a sociologist, political sociologist myself, I also studied soft coup against Erbakan in 1997-98, where they toppled or they forced the Erbakan government outside politics, and they banned Islamic education and headscarf, etc. And of course, when the military junta or military tutelage was oppressing people, they ignored or they kind of bypassed the Gülenist movement about their activities. And we have Mr. Vakkas Doğantekin. He knows all about the nature of this Gülenist movement. Mr. Vakkas, please, can you tell us what is the nature? How how different is this group? I see it as a Batinite group that attributes, hidden truths to what is normally, I mean, the general notion of Islam that's common all around the Muslim world. But they somehow in history we have Batinite, interpretations, and doctrine-wise, it looks like more Batinite, but in politically, it is more instrumental to some external powers. Please, how you see? Explain us in brief how you see this moment, if you hear us.
Yes. Hello and good night, everyone. Professor,
good night. Yes.
Thank you so much for accepting me tonight as a speaker as well. Actually, the Gulen movement, what is called FETÖ right now, Fethullah Terrorist Organization, has pretty much all the characteristics of a criminal cult. We have seen them in the West, we have seen them in the East, and it has this specific characteristics, this destructive criminal characteristics of a criminal cult. In this kind of cults, usually there is a so-called charismatic leader who is an object of worship. The followers really worship this person, and there's an indoctrination process. They require thought reform. They think these followers don't know enough about what they are following, and the ideas, the fate of the leader, the top guy should be followed without any questioning. And these groups do a lot of brainwashing from early ages, and also they force their members to act in ways not in their own interests, but as long as it serves to the interests of the cult, it goes. And there is in this kind of cults, economic, sexual, other kind of exploitation of group members. And also, this is also very true about this Gülenist cult. Pursuit of truth can be obtained exclusively through the group or group leadership. If you don't stick to the group's ideology, then you are a heretic, pretty much. They don't accept your faith. They don't consider you good enough. And that is, their truth is the ultimate truth, absolute truth. And this is the 100% case in the Gülenist movement. And also, isolation from the outside world is very important to this cult leadership. They don't want their followers to read alternative media. They don't want their followers to get their stories, get their news from various sources.
Mr. Vakas, in sociology, we have a term that is called total institutions. That like holistic institutions like prison or military service, etc., where people have a different way of life and different codes of life, and this cult is more like that. I think that's controlling all aspects of life of the followers. What do you think?
I totally agree with you.
Yeah,
I totally agree. And I remember a lot of cases from the US. I lived in the US for 13 years, and I saw a lot of villainizations, demonizations of former Gülenist people who turned their back to the cult. They didn't want to be a part of the cult anymore because they have seen what they are doing to their government, what they are doing to their country. They wanted to part ways, but the cult didn't accept, and immediately they have villainized them. They said, you are just a traitor. You have some interests with the Turkish government or with something else, and you are selling your cult. You are selling your organization because of your own interests. So immediately, the moment you turn your back on these people, they villainize you. They demonize you, and this is also one of the very strong characteristics of FETÖ movement. I remember one case. There was this person who was with this group for maybe 20 years. Of course, I'm not going to give names, but he thought this is a very humanitarian group, and they were building schools, and he was funding the schools in the US, in California. And this guy is really a good guy and spending so much money for this cause. But then this December 2013, this so-called corruption case against the government was launched by FETÖ people. And he has seen the reality.
FETÖ, can we define what the FETÖ stands for? Maybe English speakers or non-Turkish people don't understand. This is the abbreviation for?
Exactly. It is Fethullah Terrorist Organization. It was dubbed a terrorist organization in 2014, late 2014. And, it is how they are called in Turkey for foreign speakers and for foreign audience. I think it's easier to just say Gülenist people because they all call themselves Gülenist. So this guy has been funding the group for so many years, and he's a good guy. He's doing this for good purposes, at least in his mind. And then he shows the true face, the true intentions of the group, and he wants to part ways, and he criticizes the groups and in their meetings. And they immediately kick him out of these important meetings that takes place in certain places, and they don't allow him in this critical meetings anymore. And when he continues with his criticism of the movement, they kick him out completely, and he is also parting ways. And immediately they start this propaganda against him in California, saying, oh, this guy has interest with the Turkish government. He's trying to build this, he's trying to build that, and he's trying to get contracts. And they are calling him names, and they are calling him dishonest. And this guy who has spent his life like 20 years with this group is suddenly the worst guy in the planet for these people. So this isolation and alienation tactic of FETÖ is really important. They have this very strong intolerance of questions, intolerance of disagreement. You can't disagree with them. You can't question their motives. And if you do this, you are immediately out of this group. And in this way, I think it is very similar to the People's Temple in the U.S. In 1950s, Jim Jones founded this cult, this criminal cult in Jonestown, and then later they moved to California. And he also used the same tactics the FETÖ people used. He was providing the services to poor people to get attention and to get this support from the local community. And he said, I believe in this and that, as a Christian preacher. And when he saw that it is not in concert with the mainstream Christianity, he said, okay, then I'm just going ahead and forming my own church. And then he peddled himself as a faith healer, as if he's a god. He can treat people, he can heal people. And he suddenly got so many people around him. And they ended up committing suicide, on orders from the cult leader. Over 900 people died in Guyana, in French Guyana, in Latin America. So it is.
There was a similar case in Waco, Texas, in the 90s,
yes,
where
Davidians.
people also Davidians. Yeah, this cult is similar. When they get so much tested during the process, total loyalty and total obedience to the group or to the imam, and you cannot imagine, the police, a Gülenist police that killed the Russian ambassador, was a good example that if the order comes, they can do anything that's asked from them. So it is a kind of a extraordinary or different group in a way. We have Cihangir Bey. We have also some other speakers that I invited, and they did not accept the microphone. And please, this is the first round. Vakkas Bey, can you
hello?
Can you summarize? Hello, Ali Bey, Dr. Ali. Okay. Yes, because we will come back. We will do a couple of rounds, inshallah. Dr. Ali, welcome. Hello.
Thank you for accepting me.
No problem. Please go ahead.
Greetings from the United States, and I would like to talk a little bit about how the failed coup of 2016 and the aftermath of what happened corresponds with Turkey's rising influence in its immediate neighborhood. As is known, the FETÖ organization had been very influential within the Turkish military, Turkish bureaucracy, and it was as if the network of the FETÖ people within those organizations were preventing the government from implementing an effective foreign policy. So what I want to draw attention to our audience is, right after the coup, the failed coup, as we know, certain generals, certain echelon within the Turkish military began to be purged. I call this the removal of the cancer tissue from the Turkish military. And right after the coup, I followed the foreign media. One of the most widely spread notion within the foreign media was that the Turkish military was crippled, the Turkish generals were put in jail, so the Turkish foreign policy would adversely be affected with this situation. But on the contrary, what happened immediately after the failed coup was Turkey conducted the first incursion into Syria, if you remember. And that incursion turned out to be a very successful one. I remember more than 70 F-16s and jet fighters participated in that incursion, and it was very successful. So it turned out that actually by removing this cancerous tissue from the body, the Turkish military, Turkish bureaucracy, and Turkish foreign policy became more influential. And then the fight against PKK became very effective. If you remember, the audience will remember when before 2016, when there was a military operation, especially the air campaign against the PKK targets in North Iraq, the result would be basically nothing. We wouldn't see any meaningful result. And the saying was that the Turkish jets take off and bomb the mountains and the rocks and such, and then come back. But what happened after the failed coup, those generals who were preventing the government from engaging in a meaningful fight against the terror organization PKK, they were purged. And then we started to see a very successful fight against the PKK. And now we are basically seeing members of the top PKK members are being eliminated almost on a weekly basis, such as the case in Syria, such as the case in Iraq, and such as the case in Eastern Mediterranean and Libya. So it was as if those elements were cleansed of the military, of the bureaucracy, and now Turkey is conducting a very successful and effective foreign policy for its own national interest. I liken this situation to Turgut Özal's 1991 fight with the then the chief of staff, Necip Toruntaş. If you remember, Turgut Özal wanted to conduct a foreign policy vis-a-vis Iraq, but the military went against him, and the chief of staff resigned, and the Turkish Republic couldn't conduct the foreign policy under Turgut Özal. So now, as the failed coup proved that the tissue was removed from the body, and now we are seeing a very effective and successful Turkish foreign policy. This is, I think, I find it very important, and this is important for in the sense that there are those who claim that the coup attempt was a theater; it was staged. If it was staged, then how are we seeing a very successful terror campaign against the PKK? How is it that Turkish foreign policy is becoming even more successful in Eastern Mediterranean as such. So I wanted to bring up these notions in regards to the failed coup of 2016.
Yes, thank you. For the nature of this movement, especially when they say, I mean, it's the school teachers are kicked out from schools. But my take on this, and I want also the opinion from other speakers. The school teachers and education system is almost like everything for this group, because they use the schools for to make a lot of money. Of course, they have the private schools, and then they also use training or to recruit new members. Plus, they also control these youth more than their parents. And maybe Mr. Çetinkaya can give us some insights on this, how this group work, and then we'll come to the coup, the nature of the coup and what happened. You hear us?
All right, thank you, Professor, for inviting me in. I am going to give you my personal view on this. I'm not a social scientist or a political scientist. I'm a computer and electrical engineering type of scientist. I have been in contact with.
They are also very, very much into the spying and collecting all kinds of information and data for the citizens. Yes, you can contribute on this aspect if you like. Yes.
Okay, I will. Like every other Turkish citizen or living in the United States, I have come to Turkey quite often, once or twice or more than twice a year, because, I just wanted to spend time with my parents. You somehow get in touch with these people because they creep on you. And like my relatives would ask me to contribute money to something. And usually I would, because I wouldn't, I like my relatives. They are my cousins and nephews and this and that. So I give them, they ask me money because they're going to make some contribution to some good cause without asking. Well, it turns out those monies were going to Gülenis. And I have not really fully understood that until after 2016. Suddenly, some of my relatives who have been giving, like the person Vakas was describing, really, thinking that this group is doing something good for the humanity and for Muslims and for Turkish people, citizens of Turkey. And what I have noticed with this group is that it's extremely cult-like. I have known about them probably as early as 1990. And it turns out, in fact, one or two of them came and become my PhD students. And I graduated 2 PhD students who seem to have connection with this group. And one of them, swore to me many years later, he wanted to get away from this group. This actually coincides with Vakas's story. And these people are extremely intrusive. They want to know everything about you, about your family, like really to intimate details. And he didn't want to accept that. He was a little bit too smart for them. And the other person wasn't that he was smart, but I think his wife was from that group's top echelon and daughter, one of the top persons in that group, and somehow he couldn't get away with it. So, somehow once in a while until 2016, I have been talking to them, meeting them, talk, occasionally, I go to Izmir and somehow I saw this person in some shopping mall or whatever. And it was very obvious. This is really a relationship from 1996 to 2015. This is 20 years of observation. This people have lost their rational analysis of the events, and they were just following orders. And they were like I went to a house of somebody, and I have known him to be extremely religious, praying 5 times a day. I don't pray 5 times a day. He does, and his family and his children, and it's like, and then he was defending to me Demirtas, which is the PKK's legal device in Turkey. It's not a party. Everyone knows it. I am from Eastern Turkey. I am from Ağrı. I know what PKK is, and I have known PKK since 1982. I have known about them, and I know what they have done. And even to some of my relatives, they burn people's trucks who would not obey to them. And this is another cancer we have, which in Turkey, some of the Kurdish people have been subjected to, and most of them, to completely disagree, but some of them, maybe 2-3% of them are just following orders. This is really very similar. And this Gulen person is defending PKK to me, defending Demirtas to me. I said, this is really, you have really gone overboard. Do you realize where I am from, where I have come from, what PKK means, how much I would know about PKK? You just, somebody comes to your house, you offer him a tea, and then you're trying to give him some propaganda, some BS propaganda about which you have no idea. You've never been to east of Ankara, and you're not Kurdish, and your mother is not Kurdish, like my mother is, and I know what the story is, and you're telling me the story, and I left without drinking his tea. So this relationship, the things that they have published and they read, they had this weekly or monthly magazine called, in Turkish it's called Sızıntı, sort of like a leakage. I don't know exactly what one would translate that. I would look at this, it's completely...
Sızmak also means infiltration, they are also infiltrating. It's obvious in the naming of the journal.
Yes, exactly. And everything that they were doing with their members. And again, I'm really giving you an extremely narrow view, my anecdotal view of my interactions with some of those members. And but it was very interesting. I should tell you this anecdote. I know a person who's been doing United Nations projects on food security for a long time. And at UC Santa Barbara. And once in a while, we just sort of meet and have coffee, just occasionally. We're not friends. And one day he just really, in one of those meetings, occasional meetings, he just told me that it was really amazing that he said he used to go to United Nations and listen to these Gulenist groups, members with extremely broken, bad English and trying to present some project, poorly written, poorly presented, and 9-10 projects they request from United Nations, maybe one would be accepted. Even that would be given only partial funding and all that. But suddenly, he said, in 2006, suddenly those people disappeared, and other people who have come with the same names and same titles, except that we are, these are extremely smart people, like you're meeting Yale, Harvard graduates who have come here and present projects and get 9 out of 10 projects they propose. Some things happened in 2006, and a lot of people, some people that I know have told me that probably Gulanis have contracted for removing Erdogan from power. And obviously from 2006 and on, things started extremely sliding away, that they are becoming more than just some religious group, but actually more like a political force. And I saw the effect of this on the students. I saw the effect of this, and they've lost many members, but most members have stayed. Maybe like 5-10% of their members have lost. I can tell that from 2006 to 2013, and then from there on, even more. And of course, 2016 was a turning point for all of us, for them and for the rest of the country as well. This is not a simple cult anymore. It is completely manipulated organization, and my worry is that we're not really reaching out, either the Europeans or the Americans, the public. I know that we cannot change the government's mind. They know everything. They know what's happening. Their secret services inform their governments, their officials really well. They know the story. I don't think Germans don't. I don't think the Netherlands people don't, or French people don't. They all do. They know what's happening. And but the people, the people of America, or people, for example, in the U.S., people of America are extremely suspicious of Gulen. Why? Because of charter schools. Still, we're unable to convince the Americans. If you really randomly pick up somebody, like an intellectual person from the street in California, and ask them, and they will probably tell you that Erdogan is dictator, but they would somehow we don't get to tell our story. We're unable to reach those people because you can tell the media is extremely biased and this and that, but there's a big formidable challenge ahead of Turkey for reaching out the people of America or people of Europe about changing their minds, because essentially it's because the governments won't change their minds. That's
Yes.
when I look at implications. The implications is that I guess the homework for us, for Turkish people living outside or not, the homework for us, how do we change these people? Because they are good people. I met one of my colleagues I was in China in 2017 in a conference, my French colleague, who had lived in Africa half of his life, extremely smart and well-read person. I told him about 2016, the 15th of July, for 1 hour, explained to him what that means. He just looked at me with big eyes. He said, I had no idea. My media never wrote these things. And he believed my story because he knows I am genuine and I know he's genuine. But I cannot go to every French person and tell this story and change their minds. I guess the real story for us is what needs to change is that we need to make the story better known. That's what I will tell you.
Thank you, Mr. Çetin. And I want to also hear Ms. Nur Özkan also on her take on how she sees this organization, which is pretend to be like democratic, and then when they don't get, it's like a child, if they get everything what they want, they get what they want, everything is cool. But if they don't get anything, they go against you, or like a bad guy that can make hell out of that. Ms. Nur, please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Good evening to everyone, and thank you, Professor Roussel, for this opportunity. And actually, I finished my second master's degree with my thesis titled "FETÖ's Threat to State and Regime Security in the Context of Messianic Cult Terrorism," and Turkish Post Academy back in 2019. So there are a lot of things to say and much to be said about the night of July 15. But the most important thing is how dangerous this terrorist group is now, and how much scale poses a threat to not just for Turkey, but also whatever which country they still active and operating. Most of the countries are now, as many of us know, in the United States and European countries. So this is actually one of the sophisticated, and many speakers before my speech mentioned, clearly appears that this terrorist organization, Fethullah Gulen terrorist organization, or called Gulenist terrorist organization, suitably fits into messianic cult terror as one of its current examples of our time, because it contains the most distinguished codes of this typology of terror from the West, from the East, from even from the very first centuries. Many of us know, most well known is Hashashis, assassins, from 13th century. So the militants play different roles and use code names. One can see FETÖ members as a journalist who conveys the messianic messages of his leader on his column or his tweets, or as just soldier, as we have all seen on the night of July 15. They seemed as a soldier, but they, after all, became a killing machine with the Messiah's order. So they're the group's leader's order, who actually resides in Pennsylvania. Fethullah Gulen himself now. So sometimes they could be a businessman who collects funds and donations to finance their so-called messiah's luxury spending, but they don't even know, what where this money flows. And sometimes they could be an academician who claims that Fethullah Gulen is close as their abdominals to them, like very
Miss
close
Noor,
to them.
Miss Noor, we should mention that maybe almost 90%, maybe 95% of the literature, academic literature in the West, especially in English, are sponsored. Like you see in Twitter, like sponsored tweets or sponsored brands or something. Almost all of the contents are sponsored by this group by themselves, with projects, with sponsoring, graduate students to write on them, positively, etc. So the literature you find, as an academician also, I know that how they work, and this literature doesn't represent the real. There are few objective studies also that doesn't go into this category, but most of the literature, unfortunately, are produced by themselves, for themselves, or to promote themselves. Please go ahead.
Yeah, maybe we should mention also the evolution of FETÖ into Messianic terrorist organization. It has taken almost half a century, as we all know, since 1960s, and likewise carrying a huge potential to pose a terrorism threat in international scale. This terrorist organization has shown itself on the night of July 15, 2016, shoot and murder civilians under the pretext of military coup, attempting to overthrow the democratically elected government while taking full control over the state institutions. By the time they've been already infiltrated the whole security establishment of Turkey, most of them, let's say. So they use the notion of hizmet, servicing, as we all know, and education to attract Muslims all around the world, and young Muslim children, kids, and primarily taking Turkey's financial, political, and social support somehow. But their big recruitment and propaganda strategy was to give message of dialogue, peace, and tolerance to engage with the international audience, political decision makers, and religious authorities, and they succeeded to get back from the Western world, as Professor Ursal said, and unfortunately. So they, throughout the years, extended their capacities over the state and security institutions, education, media, financial and social institutions as well in the overseas. And by the time they infiltrated the police, judiciary, military, and bureaucracy, and every vessel even into the president's and prime minister's office at that time. So among its recruitment, infiltrating, brainwashing, propaganda, indoctrination, and espionage methods, the concepts of tedbir, or let's say takiya, come into the prominence in FETÖ's operations. So same as other messianic cults, Gülenist, the member of the terrorist organization, attributed to godlike features to their leader, as it is observed in many destructive messianic cults in entire history. So on the same path, FETÖ's leader's golden generation discourse supports these messianic aims, was fitting well as persuasion tool for his followers during the indoctrination process. So while FETÖ overall, I will just sum up and just try to narrow it down. FETÖ represents almost all features of destructive messianic cults, and Gülen himself, the leader, himself carries the leader codes of narcissistic, sociopathic, and paranoid personality, which are also distinguished characteristic of terrorist organization leaders. So he pretends to be a humble religious scholar. On the other hand, implicitly pretend to be a messiah of our time for Muslim world. So it can be seen explicitly, for sure, but it can be seen very, the code word of his books and also his dreams, and there's, preaches and speeches. So it is clearly seen once it is analyzed. So after all, there are many questions that should be asked for not just Turkey. I mean, Turkey already realized how much dangerous the terrorist organization. For that, July 15 was another, very dramatic, tragic experience for Turkey, but on the other hand, was another advantage to just reveal a revelation of the threat of this terrorist organization, and FETÖ was able to legitimize its terror on that day because therefore ultimate goal and holy mission, as many cult terrorist organization represents. And the other questions is that is this goal only limited with its messianic claims, or there are more to that? So if there are more to that, it clearly, very. It will not be a surprise. They can, attempt some same type of terrorist attempts or infiltration or other secretive structure other countries normally. So because their holy mission, so-called holy mission, led them to kill innocent civilians on that night, July 15. So that already makes FETÖ more dangerous than other conventional terrorist organization, because they're clandestine organization, secrecy very important. They waited for 60 years to just make it real. The apocalyptic, let's say, their salvation day come true. So many indicators, as I try to summarize, that this cult terror group, FETÖ, threatens state and regime security in Turkey, and there is no any guarantee that they will not attempt in other country to trigger, their deliverance day, let's say, and also other type of threat. So my last point is that will be July 15. They expected to be that night to be ultimate celebration, their apocalyptic liberation day. but it ended up with big frustration because of the Turkish people's. Turkish people's resistance, big resistance, very big resistance, very respectful resistance, and also Turkey's
leadership
was another indicator that not to be succeeded.
Yes,
So
we'll come to the coup night and why failed and
Yeah.
its outcomes. I think
Yeah.
we'll in the next round. And thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. And we have. I just before that I wanna mention that this is not a typical Islamic groups that we have Sufi groups mostly in Turkey, and in other Muslim countries you have Salafis and Muslim Brotherhood. This is not something like that. This is more like a proxy group, like that's guided by external forces to control, to have information flow, also manipulate the system economically, politically, and religiously. This is in the religious side, as a sociologist, I see this is the project of Islam Light. I normally, when I talk to Arabs, I give the example of Islam Life or Islam Mukhaffaf, or kind of a lightened Islam or decaffeinated Islam. That is not the real Islam, because they took some part and they accept some part and they overlook or disregard some aspects of Islam. So this is a different group, and we know they have a huge resources. It's not natural. It's not like their genius. You cannot attribute it to their geniusness. This is a retired preacher, Gulen himself. We know our preachers. Not like a global scale movement. This is without any external support, especially resources. Like just one example, then I give to Ömer Kızılcık, Öz Kızılcık, because any Islamic group or Jamaat, we say in Turkish, and it's the same in Arabic, with Nur Hanım, can we close the mic for now, please?
Sure.
And if any group, is able to establish a small journal, small magazine, or even a radio, could be like very lucky. Radio would be a luxury for a religious group if he has even like a great follower. But for the Gülenists, they have tens of radios, newspapers, magazines, and about 10 different TV channels, like for kids, for sport, and for news, and other documentaries, etc. So we know this is also a sponsored group that was funded or kind of strategized by a foreign state. And we know this for example, in Lebanon, we have Hezbollah that's sponsored by Iran, and it's a proxy for America. To name it exactly. And with these resources, no other any religious groups could found so far. Not because of the geniusness of this group, but they used all these hurdles. Even today, when Turkey tried to ban or kind of take over the Turkish schools, that's so-called, they were saying Turkish schools with the American brand. And when the Turkey, even from the outcome, Gülen himself living in America, is well protected. And when Turkey tried to get back or recover these schools that are funded by Turkish people's donations, etc., in Africa, in Asia, and many countries, we always see American resistance and defense of these groups. So the connection is very obvious, and we know the relations started during the Cold War era, that they used this group to to fight against communism in Turkey, and then they promoted to a more kind of not moderate Islam but light Islam in a way, and it's very instrumental in a way when you have Turkish police from this group or bureaucrat or soldier. You get all the information for free. Turkish government pays the salary of this guy, but this guy, this police, let's say, or any other bureaucrat, or even a civil society member or like a journalist, he gives the information, of course, to Gülen, and then, of course, the information is also taken from the Uncle Sam. So it's very instrumental and very unique group in a way, and they are very peaceful in appearance. But when they got into maybe a hurdle, they become very aggressive, as we have seen in Turkey. And Mr. Ömer Özkızılcık, he's also a security studies expert. He knows, how they operated in the security institutions, as our security institutions become freer, more effective after they kick out these Gülenist members. Please go ahead.
So thanks for giving me the microphone, and thanks for organizing this event. I think it's really timely and an important one. So first of all, I want to answer your question shortly, and then speak about the regional implications in line with the title of this space Twitter. First of all, the Gülen sect has been infiltrating Turkish military and Turkish other institutions and bureaucracy for decades. And also Dr. Ali has explained that after the coup attempt and the kick out of Gülen sect members from the military, that the Turkish military has become much more effective, in contrast to the general media narrative being published in the big newspapers like Financial Times, New York Times, etc. So therefore, I think we have to look in how the Gülen sect has infiltrated the Turkish military for decades. So there was an important issue that the first rule of a Gülen sect member was to disguise himself and to become secret and to hide its identity. So a Gülen sect member inside the Turkish military would have two personalities: his real personality and the personality he was given by the Gülen sect, and he is using to legitimize himself and to grow inside the Turkish military and to come into decision-making positions. And from then afterwards, they have been systematically trying to make their own followers go into the Turkish military and to facilitate their recruitment by stealing the exams and allowing them the better education, allowing them the better positioning inside the Turkish military. And they have even manipulated the internal hierarchy in the Turkish military. And while we had two different command structures, the first official command structure in Turkish military, we had also a parallel command structure by the Gülen sect, and these two command structures have sabotaged everything in the Turkish military, and it made the efficiency of the Turkish military go down, and it was very, not very weak, but it was weaker than after the coup. So with the coup attempt, and it failed thanks to the heroism of the Turkish people, and afterwards we have seen that the Turkish military has become much more efficient. But about speaking about the coup and its implications, I have to underline that the coup itself has several aspects and several dynamics go hand in hand, and they are all intertwined with each other. So it has for sure a domestic dynamics. It for sure has a history of messianic cult inside the Gülen sect, and it for sure has also regional implications. But one of the most important, I think, is the general context in which this coup attempt happened. So it did not come out of nowhere. It came from a context, and this context was the beginning of the Arab uprising in 2011. When the Arab people uprised against the authoritarian regimes, we have seen in the general media that this was highly welcomed, and that the Western audience and many in international media hoped for democracy in the Arab states. But with the first elections, some were traumatized in the West, and the narrative changed very quickly because, in contrast to the expectations, the people in Arab states did not vote for secular politicians, but they did vote for politicians with a clear Muslim or Islamic identity and who have a conservative or even Islamist policies approach. So therefore, this changed the narrative, and this gave states like the United Arab Emirates a new opportunity to counter this democracy movement in the Arab world. And it was countered in Libya, it was countered in Egypt, and the coup attempt in Egypt was successful, and this changed the entire regional geostrategic alliance formations and the situation in the Middle East. But when the coup attempt in Turkey happened, it's not a coincidence that the United Arab Emirates has actually funded this coup attempt. So they have spent money on the Gülen sect, and they are still connected and cooperating with each other against the Turkish position and the Turkish foreign policy, not without a reason. The main reason was to end and finish the pursuit of democracy and popular elections in the Middle East, because there's nothing more than elections a king or an autocratic governor would fear. So therefore, the United Arab Emirates wanted to end it with the coup attempt in Turkey and to put a stop sign. However, it did not succeed. So since then, we have seen that the pursuit of democracy and the pursuit of popular elections in the Middle East has still ongoing. So in Libya, we still have
Mr. Omar, can we just spend a couple of minutes with also other speakers why the coup didn't succeed, or what was the difference from other coups in the past? Because Turkey experienced several coups, successful coups in the past, and why this one was different?
So should I answer, or do you want
yes,
to
please. Here is a couple of...
So there were many dynamics. So there were dynamics in the internal Turkish security structure as well in the Turkish popular opinion. So the Turkish people played a significant, crucial role, and the heroism of the Turkish people is incredible. So I do not see many nations who would stop tanks without any weapons and would lie themselves on the ground to be rolled over by the tanks. The heroism of the Turkish people was incredible, and it was the decisiveness. And why it was different from the previous coup attempts, it has many dynamics, one of which was that the government enjoyed huge popular support, and that the elections in Turkey have become very significant for the Turkish public mind, but also that the coupists had no popular base on which they stand. So the previous coup attempts were mostly conducted by the Kemalist elites of the Turkish military, who in some parts of the Turkish public enjoyed support, but the Gülen sect did not. However, there was also a second dynamic, and this is inside the security apparatus. The role of the special police forces inside Turkey during the coup night needs to be underlined, because it was the Turkish special force of the police who entered the bastions of the coupists, who sacked the coupists, and who arrested the putschists. So therefore, the Turkish government's decision to strengthen the special force inside the police structure has been a crucial factor in stopping and preventing this coup attempt. Another second important aspect was the success of the Turkish intelligence. So we know at that night that the putschists tried to attack the Turkish intelligence, and they have been retaliated. And what the Turkish intelligence played for an important role at that night was also crucial to prevent this coup attempt. So in summary, I would argue that two main aspects has been the main decisive factor to stop this coup, and which made it different from the previous coup attempts. The first, the popular opinion, that the government was highly supported and that the Gülen sect did not have any public base. Secondly, the change in the Turkish security structure, that the police was much more stronger than it was in the previous coup time periods. And more important, also as well important, the role of the Turkish intelligence. So the changing dynamics internally in the Turkish security structure played a significant role. And I think I should stop here and you can go on.
Yes, thank you. We have Rich Alston. We have also Ekim Bey. We have, several other Yusuf Erim, and we'll come back quickly. But I want to mention that when the Gülenists were so confident to topple the government, they did not use all of their forces. They had a good presence in the legal system, in bureaucracy, in police, and in the military, but they were disguising themselves. Nobody knew, but I think they wanna first try to make a legal coup, trying to topple the government with corruption charges, etc., and elections. When this did not work out, they use other powers they have. But in the meantime, their game became more apparent. Their plan became more apparent, and every time they failed, they lost a major ground. And we go to Mr. Ekim, and please, as a citizen, how do you see the night of the coup? How people, reacted to the coup, and that's, I think, the major cause for, despite all these dynamics. Please go ahead.
Professor, thank you. I really appreciated all the insights that previous speakers gave, and I agreed with it. My kids joined me this evening, so I'm going to have to put them to bed shortly. So I ask your forgiveness in advance that I will not join the entire program, but I just have a few comments. To answer your question, Professor, I think what we saw that night is that apparently Turkey's sociologic structure has changed throughout the years. Ömer already commented on why the coup didn't succeed in comparison to previous coup attempts that did succeed. But I think a major factor is, of course, that Turkey's sociology changed, that the people were less willing to go home when they saw uniforms on the streets telling them to go home. So I think that was really the major factor. And of course, all the other things that were mentioned. But I think we were right to focus on what happened internally right after the coup, especially, in focusing on efforts on saving the republic and fighting Gülenists in Turkey. But today, I think we need to shift our focus to fighting them to where their leadership actually lives, from where they derive their legitimacy, from where they generate their income. And unfortunately, that's in the United States. And I think today the main misperception about the coup in the West is that it was a reaction to the government.
I cannot hear him. Maybe come back. Did we lose him? No, he's there, but I cannot hear him.
Yeah,
Neither you? Okay, then we move on to Mr. Yusuf Erim, and if he comes back, we'll give him the mic. Mr. Yusuf, please go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, I hope everyone's having a good night. Well, I've been listening in to the last couple speakers, so I'm just going to try to touch on things that other people haven't touched on. I kind of want to talk more about the future than the past, because we've had everyone summarize very well what happened coup night and what's been going on over the past 5 years. And when I look at the next 5 years, looking down the line to 2026, when we're celebrating the decade anniversary of the coup attempt, one of the, I think, the major important lessons that we've learned in the last 5 years and that we should look at for the next 5 years is labels, I think. I think Turkey pushing too much and trying to explain FETÖ as a terrorist group to the rest of the world sometimes causes a problem with countries where this group does very well in masking its intentions and masking its motives. Now, we have to realize that they are very at public relations. They're very expert at marketing. They have a very high understanding of these two strategies and these two skill sets. And when we look at their activities, whether it be NGO, their media, that they have campaigns against Turkey, and also their for other continents, Europe, across the
Is it me? Yes.
Need to do is criminal activities in the next 5 years going forward. Now, one of the things that Turkey has done in its counterterrorism operations over the past decade is it's taken the fight against terror beyond its borders. Now, Turkey doesn't fight the PKK on Turkish soil anymore. It fights the PKK in Syria. It fights the PKK in Iraq. It fights the PKK elsewhere. Same thing with ISIS. It fights ISIS in Syria. So Turkey has learned to fight terrorism outside of its borders, giving minimal damage inside to the country domestically. Now, when we look at how Turkey is going to counter FETÖ in the coming years, this is also going to be a cross-border fight. But unfortunately, this fight is not going to be fought with weapons. This is going to be a diplomatic war. This is going to be a judicial war. So part of this diplomatic and judicial war that we're going to fight against this group, it's going to be very important to explain this group so people have a firm understanding. Now, I've given a lot of speeches, especially over the last 3 days, regarding this issue. And again, I think that one of the most important things is to explain to people from other countries, especially officials, that this is a crime syndicate. This crime syndicate has a hierarchy, just like the mafia. They are partaking in money laundering. They're partaking in tax fraud. They are recruiting, heavily recruiting. They're using their education network to graduate these students and then strategically place them inside institutions. So unfortunately, what we're seeing, especially in countries that have a weaker governance system, not the Western countries, but countries that have a weaker governance system, either newer democracies or countries that are not yet democracies, we're seeing this infiltration into their confidential institutions going very, very quickly. And this is the blueprint. This is the exact blueprint of what happened in Turkey in the 80s and 90s and double O's. And we're seeing this blueprint unfolding in Central Asia. We're seeing it unfolding in Africa. We're seeing it unfolding in Southeast Asia. And this has become the modus operandi of this terror group, of the Gülenist network. So one can safely assume that this group, while it may not have the capabilities anymore to launch a meaningful undemocratic takeover in Turkey, it will have the capabilities most likely on the African continent within the next 5 to 10 years. And I think this is something of very, very great concern that people on the African continent need to think about. Central Asia has slowly understood. Turkey has been able to explain to our friends in Central Asia that this group is no good. We're seeing slowly many Central Asian countries start taking action against FETÖ, which is very, very good. That's the last thing we want to see. And of course, the Russians were one of the first country, I think the first country to shut down FETÖ. They shut them down before anybody else. So it's very, very important to see that countries that have shut this group down going forward, especially their relationship with their Muslim communities, is very, very good. So it's important not to let this group hijack the conversation, especially in the education system with Islam. They are not a religious group. They like to show themselves as a religious group. And yes, religion is the basis of their activities. But at the end of the day, their only real currency is power. That's all they're after for, power and influence. And this has all the hallmarks of a cult. This has all the hallmarks of a crime syndicate. And at the end of the day, as I said, Whether you want to call it a terrorist group, whether you want to call it the mafia, whether you want to call it a cult, a crime syndicate, I don't think we should get stuck on labels. We need to look at operation.
Yes, thank you. Your voice get bad.
Blueprint has now repeated as it was in Turkey. That's basically all I have to say. Everything else has been covered by friends. I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you very much. And this group also is using Turkey's brand, Turkey's popularity, and also like serving the external interest, like as if like you have a Turkish carpet or any Turkish product. People love Turkish products. Some of them, this is natural, but and you have, like, let's say you replace it with let's say Chinese, with a cheap one, and people you cheat your own people. You know, you say this is like a Turkish product, but you give them another product that's not that has nothing to do with the Turkish, either culturally or politically. Yes.
One more thing. You asked one of the previous speakers what was different between this coup and previous coups in Turkish history. And I think one of the most important differences between the 2006 coup versus other coups was that this coup was carried out by a non-state actor. The previous coups, you had the institution of the military. It may be fragments of the military, but at the end of the day, it was fragments inside of the military institution. This had nothing to do with the military institution. This had everything to do with a non-state actor carrying out this coup attempt. I think that was the most glaring difference between previous coups and the 2016 coup attempt.
Yes, thank you very much. And we have Rich Austin, and he's a Turkey expert. He's following also Turkish affairs pretty much. Please welcome Annie. Welcome and nice to have you. And please explain to us why this coup attempt or coup plot is not understood or kind of overlooked in the West, and other comments you want to make. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor, and it's a pleasure to be here with such a distinguished group and people whose work I follow very, very closely. From the United States perspective, the first thing to remember is that we, as a nation, do not spend much time thinking about foreign affairs. Washington is one thing.
Sorry. Nur Hanım, mikrofonu kapatma şansınız olursa. Can you close the mic? Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Okay, certainly. The United States, as a country of 330 million or so, and very continental in size, does not pay much attention to foreign affairs. If you follow U.S. press, you know that we are mostly concerned with domestic affairs, both in terms of economy and society and so forth. So very little attention is paid outside of Washington and New York to foreign affairs, and that is paid to foreign affairs is frequently focused on Western Europe. So it's a relatively small community that focuses on Turkey, and it's a small amount of time that the rest of the audience pays. So you have a very small window of attention for people focused on Turkey, and that tends to be grabbed by either long-standing stereotypes about Turkey related to the Turkish military and the long decades of military tutelary rule, or spectacular things like the Iraq War and our differences over Iraq, differences over Syria, and so forth. But also the personality of President Erdogan. So this is what my friend Soner Joptay and others have referred to as reductio ad Erdoganum, which is the tendency to oversimplify Turkey by viewing Turkey only through the lens of President Erdogan. And since for many in Washington, he has become an unsympathetic figure over the past 10 to 15 years due to differences in foreign policy and perceived democratic backsliding, there is a critical error made by people who assume that if Gulen is anti-Erdogan, Erdogan that there must be some essential legitimacy to his enterprise. Now, those who have followed the history of the Gulen movement, and there are many, many, such as Danny Roderick and Michael Reynolds up at Princeton, Danny Roderick's at Harvard, those who have studied it know exactly what this group did. And they know the culpability behind the coup attempt, or I like to refer to it as a factional uprising for the same reasons that Yusuf talked about. This was not a top-down institutional coup attempt. This was a factional uprising by a group that had infiltrated into the Turkish military. So because people make this mistake and they don't follow sort of the history of what the Gulen movement tried to do in Turkey with the infiltration of institutions, with this Altın Nesil idea, Americans don't have that backstory. So they tend to assume the best about him and the worst about his opponents. So I think this implies a couple of things in terms of Turks trying to help Americans understand what happened that night and what happened in the 2 decades before. The first is that, and I agree with Yusuf here, to focus on the criminal rather than the terroristic aspects of this. And by the way, the definitional problems of whether the Gulen movement is a terror organization or a criminal organization actually lose the American audience. The truth is the acts of July 15th, 2016 clearly were terroristic acts, but the group itself has more in common with the mafia or the Al Capone type organization. So I think Yusuf is onto something here, that the attempt should be to educate the criminal aspect of what they're doing rather than to focus on the terroristic designation. The other thing is, don't focus with the American audience on July 15th, because the truth is that one event, while spectacular, really is not the meat of what happened. What the attempt to overtake and overthrow the state actually ran for 2 decades. And students of Turkish military relations with the United States know this in terms of the Kumpas, the Balyos and Ergenekon and things like that. And there's so much good work that has been done by Turkish journalists. And we can look at Hablamitoğlu, Sedat Ergin, Hanefi Avcı, John Özgel, many, many others who have written in well before the coup itself was attempted, that have written in detail about this. And not much of that is available in English. So I think there should be more work in translating the very good studies that have been done. I think another thing that would be good is some compendium in English language of the evidence that has come out since the coup attempt. And I'm talking about digital forensics related to Ergenekon, Balyos, Eagle, and Baylok. I'm talking about Fethullah Gülen's own words, the tapes where he talked about moving through the body of the state like cells through the human body. I'm talking about the day of coup forensics, who was where, when, and things like that. I just don't think there's been good volumes with Hakan Yavuz, I think, put out a pretty good study. But other than that, with the detailed forensics, there's just not been enough published out there. And finally, one other thing that explains why Americans don't understand this is that we have to realize for probably 5 or 6 years in Washington, the Gulen movement essentially served as an adjunct to the official foreign ministry. The movement was bringing people from Washington, so senators, congressmen, think tank people, to Turkey and to Central Asia, I think with government approval and perhaps even with some sort of an understanding. They became the face of Turkey in Washington, D.C., and they made many friends during that period of time. Now, it wasn't until after 2012 when they became much more aggressive towards openly challenging the government of Turkey that their standing with the Turkish government changed. But to be fair and to be honest, I think if people in Ankara didn't fully see what was going on at that time, then we have to allow for the fact that the Americans will take longer to perceive what happened as well. But again, to wrap it up, just focusing on what happened that night is not enough. The education effort to get Americans to understand what happened in proper context will take some studying, some publication, and some engagement on what it was the Gülen movement was up to for 10 or 15 years prior, and how that's reflected both in official documents and in the journalistic work and research that was done.
Thank you, Rich, and we appreciate these inputs. But some of the Turkey exports also contribute to the, misunderstanding or maybe lack of understanding toward the Turkey's case due to their maybe political position. They act like an opposition. And which is normal, but at the same time, our democracy have maybe some problems, but even American democracy has problems. You don't want to equate Turkey's democracy with Egypt or, Turkey came a long way and the process is still very active, and it's also, generally in a positive sign, and this dictatorship discourse kind of legitimize in a way. I see kind of an Islamophobic attitude, sometimes turn into a Turkophobic attitude, sometimes turn into more concrete anti-Erdogan attitude. But, our experts also sometimes feed this bias in a way. And we have Mr. Ekim came back.
I apologize,
yes.
Professor. I'm sorry. I think I got disconnected.
Yes.
I don't
Yes,
know how
maybe
far
the
I
kids,
got.
maybe the kids, they wanna sleep or something.
No, actually, I finished my talk, but I thought I was still online until I didn't hear an answer, and I realized I got cut off.
Too sad, really.
No, so I don't know where I left it, but my main point was that, first of all, I agree with most of everything that's been said, especially...
Mr. Ekim, let's focus on, how the outcome or the failure of this coup attempt affected Turkey and, regional politics. We have, maybe a quarter an hour to wrap up. And let's discuss the outcome of this attempt, kind of historic event that Turkish people rejected this coup attempt, and then now we have a new ball game, new Turkey. Can you focus on that aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are others maybe better equipped to answer that question. My main point was that we were right to focus on what happened that night internally. But if we want to win this fight, we need to convince our allies that the Gülenists are not just a danger to Turkey, but they are a threat to regional peace and stability, because Turkey is an important country, and our instability means regional instability. And today, I think the Gülenists have a better strategy, a more focused strategy, and a better roadmap than we do. We need to quickly formulate a good strategy and a matching roadmap. We need to allocate tasks to people who are capable of carrying out those tasks, and we need to make sure we have proper budgets for it. I think our focus is too domestic. It needs to be institutional. The leadership of this cult is in the United States, and unless we convince American decision makers and the American public that this organization does not deserve $750 million in U.S. taxpayers' dollars every year, and they shouldn't have charter schools on United States Air Force's bases, I think we will lose this fight. So I really think that it's important that we need to make a few things clear, one of which is that 95% of Turkey's public does not like the Gülenists and believe that they are responsible for this coup attempt. This is not just an Erdogan issue, as Rich also pointed out. And to do that, we need to commission independent research in the United States. We need Americans with credibility in the United States carrying out their own investigation and making that public. And that needs to have an American focus. Americans will not care that much what happened on July 15th in Turkey. They will care about where their tax money is going. So we need dramatically need a change a shift in our own strategy. So I don't know if I got to that point because I kept talking, but I worked in counterterrorism, and I know how these people operate, these Gülenists, and they operate partly as a criminal organization, as Rich pointed out, like an Al Capone kind of organization, but they're really set up like an intelligence organization. And that's the way we should be dealing with it, as a counterintelligence operation. The way we're dealing with it now is as if they're a regular criminal organization, and I don't think it's fruitful anymore at this point. So again, there were dozens of books written about this in Turkey, but every author who was courageous enough to publish on the issue has been discredited or thrown in jail under trumped-up charges. And we know of many police officers, prosecutors, judges who were killed. These are the things that we need to convince people of in the West. I mean, at least for me, this is where my head is. The Western public needs to understand what happened to Turkey that night, of course, but it's also important that they understand what a threat these Gülenists are, that they're sheep in wolves' clothes. I mean, they are defending LGBT rights through their many media outlets that they have. But you and I both know that they don't care much about LGBT rights. They're a woman-hating, anti-Semitic criminal cult. So this is something that we need to make clear, and we must move forward. And we must move forward very rapidly because changes are happening very quickly in the political landscape in Europe and certainly in the United States as well. So we must get our allies and the Western public to understand this. And for that, we need a better strategy. That's basically my main point, what I wanted to make.
Yes, thank you. I think it's a good point. We need to pay more effort. And but they have also, a big lobby, a lot of money that's defending them, and they also kind of inside now, and especially when Turkey began to act as an independent force in the region, it become target from both sides. So, but Turkey cannot, give up on its independent policies, cannot do what just the West wants from them, because the West doesn't do what Turkey wants. So it's more like a bargaining Turkey with its decent power. But the talk about imprisoning journalists, of course there are imprisoned journalists, but not because of journalism. Very few cases maybe, but the Gülenists and the PKK, they registered most of their members as journalists, and then when they were persecuted for other offenses, they cry out that the journalists are jailed in Turkey. And of course, the free media is very important in the West. It's almost like sacred in the West, and it makes a big noise against Turkey. And we have Mehmet Çelik. You want to add something, sir?
Good evening. Yes, I just want to actually build on what Yusuf said about, the cross-border fight that Turkey is carrying out against the PKK and, let's say, ISIS. And I think it's important that now, it took many years for Turkish citizens or Turkish state institution to know about this, the true intentions of this group. And now we expect the West to suddenly know the true face of this group, in a few years. I think it's going to take many years for us to, this fight and this diplomatic strategy has to be done through a very solid patience that, we should keep doing and keep explaining and keep pushing for people to understand what it is. But it is not something that's going to happen, overnight or in a matter of couple years. I think it's going to take longer than that. But the main point is to not give up on that fight and on our position against this group, because it has harmed us and it is going to harm anyone that's not aligned with their interests. So that's one thing. The other thing, I think that the timing of this and the timing of us explaining the true intentions of this group align with the same time where there was this rise of anti-Erdoganism in the West, be it in Europe or United States or in media, Western media in general, or Western political circles in general. I think that makes the job a little bit more difficult because anything that is anti-Erdogan in the political circles or in media sells. So be it through Turkish experts, the so-called Turkish experts, or be it in media, be it in lobby political circles, anti-Erdoganism sells now. So because they are very strong in those circles and they have established themselves and now they're part of the circles basically, so it makes it more difficult for the Turkish diplomats or Turkish intellectuals to explain the true intentions of this group. So it is something that's going to take a long time, but patience, I think, is going to be key in making sure that this fight is, end up with some sort of result. And just to comment on what I believe Rich said about the evidences, there has been evidences minute by minute explained in several languages I have come across, particularly in English, just about that night, let alone about the group itself, about the cult or the terrorist organization itself. There has been evidences, how about these bylock talks about, excuse me, about the coup night, even the night of it, or days actually going into the night. So there has been publications, but unfortunately, whether they become popular or not is another thing. But I have come across them, and of course, the fact that they haven't become popular is one thing. Is our maybe the Turkish state or Turkish media's fault at one point, but it's also another thing to note. We should note that there's also a blockage, for these evidence to come out. There is a block for them. There is, through this anti-Erdogan position, everything that is actually against FETÖ or against even the PKK is put under a different category, and the voice doesn't become very popular. There was one article about what Turkey does in Syria in New York Times, and I don't think it was even pro-Turkey or pro-Erdogan, but it was somewhat neutral, I would say. But just because this article was very somewhat neutral and not, just simply saying Turkey's fighting against Kurds in Syria, the reporter or the journalist was put on. There was a black propaganda against the journalist on social media, just because the New York Times journalist wasn't writing so much about and so much anti-Turkey stuff. So this is just what I wanted to add, and thank you.
Thank you. We know that their propaganda machine is very active since the beginning. They invested in the media from the beginning, big time, when they bought Zaman newspaper from another religious group, and early on invested in the media very much, and controlling the knowledge flow, information flow is very critical for them. And for the propaganda machine is continuing. In the last round, I want to just make it an open discussion on the impact of this coup attempt, or the failure of this attempt domestically and maybe regionally or externally. Has Turkey become a stronger country or a weaker one? Anybody who want to comment? Ibrahim Bey, maybe he was. waiting for a long time, but briefly, please. Yes.
For sure, Turkey became a stronger country because they were like tumors of cancer in the body of the country. They were everywhere in the state. So when they were removed from military, from police, from judiciary, etc., more honest, more patriotic people took seats, and they moved Turkey forward. Particularly in the army, there is an apparent improvement. At least it did 3 or 4 operations, cross-border operations, and it was successful. The army was successful. I remember that some people were cynically talking about the Turkish army when it entered Afrin or Jarablus or Elbap, because they said qualified generals and officers were discharged. So Turkish army is not in a position to protect the country, etc. But contrary to their claims, Turkey showed that it can do better without veto, and it is now called as a regional power. So before that, Turkey was actually an ill body, as I said, with full of tumors, but now it's quite healthy. There's no manipulation. There's no mischief. There's no this hidden agendas among bureaucrats. So I believe that Turkey is already being better, and it will be better and better in the future. So sometimes such kind of coups are, of course, terrible. But if it is removing such kind of diseases from another aspect, it's something good then. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes. Thank you. So curing the virus or the tumor from the body, sometimes painful, but it can make your body more healthier, and Turkey, you say, becomes stronger afterward. We can, anybody can pick up if you like. We have Omar Karim from the UK. If you wanna pick up the mic, he's my friend from Pakistan. Maybe how Mr. Rich, can you close the mic for a second, please? It's doing making echo.
Mr. Rustam?
Yes, go ahead, Vakas, please.
I would like to just say a few things, and then I will have to leave. I'm still working at the agency today. I work for Andol agency. Actually, the thing about explaining this.
Yes, Omar, we are hearing you. Just give us some a minute. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I just joined a bit late, and I was listening to you. I think the biggest.
We'll come back to you. We'll come back, Omar. We'll come back to you. Please hold on. Thank you. Vakas is gonna. Thanks. Vakas, please go ahead.
First off, U.S. Congress knows 100% what Fethullah Gülen movement is, what they try to do. It is an organization they have supported from probably day one. So it really doesn't make too much sense, explaining these people to congressmen and senators, because they really know who these people are. And then U.S. Congress, how things work. They just go to the highest bidder. Turkey will never spend much more than the UAE lobby or the Greek lobby or the Armenian lobby, Israeli lobbies. It can never outbid these lobbies in the U.S., and they can not really persuade these senators and Congress people. So it doesn't really make too much sense to spend tons of money on lobbies, on doing lobbies in the U.S. Congress. Maybe persuading the U.S. public is a different issue. That might be done through different channels, supporting these conservative communities and telling them that a radical preacher, an Islamic preacher, supposedly is cheating American taxpayers, and they are funding their schools and cheating FBI and all this, etc. I mean, they are so fiscally irresponsible. They are abusing these H-1B visas in their schools. We can explain this to some segments of the American society, but really explaining them to senators or congressmen, there's nothing to explain. They already know what's going on. And for example, I was talking to Richard Haas, the president of Council on Foreign Relations in Los Angeles, and it was right after the coup. And I just asked him, what do you think about this stuff going on, and if Gulen is behind this coup? And he said, no, I haven't seen anything. There's no credible evidence. They just talk the same language. There's no credible evidence. I mean, and I said, what do you mean there's no credible evidence? There is video evidence. When there's video evidence of something in the court of law, you just shut up. I mean, you just get your punishment because there is a video that proves everything. And despite everything, these people in higher up, status, and they just don't want to believe. For Western governments, it's a matter of pros and cons. They look at the Gulen movement and they think, okay, maybe they might be a little dangerous to our taxpayers, and American government. Who cares about the American taxpayers anyway? So they think we can use these people against especially Muslim countries or against Russia, against China, in a lot of places, because they have Muslim names and they can be really used very extensively in these geographies. And just think about like 20 years from now, the children of these people will be even more hateful than the Armenian diaspora's children against Turkey. And these people will be speaking Turkish. They will still be Muslim somehow, some kind of Muslim. And they will be very vulnerable. They will be very open to exploitation by these Western governments. So they think, they can be used in the long run, in the long term, against these Muslim countries especially, and against adversaries of the US government apparatus and also Israel. So they continue supporting these people. So their interests really align with the interests of FETÖ people at this time. And if you look at Western media, for example, in 2011, in early 2010s, you can see a lot of articles in New York Times, in Atlantic magazine, criticizing this movement, at least questioning their motives, especially when it comes to their schools. But after especially the coup attempt in 2016, you cannot see any article criticizing the Gulen movements, which is very odd, which just gives you an idea about how these media organizations operate as well. They just get orders from certain people, and they just don't want these people to be criticized anymore. They don't want them to be touched because they are going to be used as a subterfuge to infiltrate into especially Muslim and American adversaries' geographies. That is,
or as a pressure group to pressure Turkey, or get some concessions or other issues.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So thank you very much. Good night to everyone.
Thank you. And I know Turkey's military became more independent, and Turkey is more effective in also fighting both ISIS and PKK terrorism inside and out. Plus Turkey's presence in Libya, I think, was not, for example, be possible if the Gulanis were, just dominating the military, because they were, when ISIS controlled, Syria and Iraq, especially Mosul. We know the Mosul consulate of Turkey also was was attacked, and they hijacked the consulate. And Turkish government asked them to bomb these ISIS convoys to prevent or to discourage them to approach Turkish consulates. But the Gülenist generals refused to do so. And then, Turkish consulate members in Mosul, they became prisoners, or they became hostage of this organization. Of course, they were later released, but it was a very bad example how, insiders can hurt you in a bigger fight. Of course, Omar is following the Middle East and the Gulf region, etc. Maybe we can ask him if the coup succeeded in Turkey, maybe also the Qatar embargo and the Gulf. He is an expert on the Gulf region in Rusi, and a friend of us. How you see it, especially the Gulf, if the coup plotters were successful, how it would affect the Qatar embargo and the Gulf project, Trump, and deal of the century, even normalization with Israel. Mr. Omar.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm actually in Pakistan for some months now, so not very much connected with UK. But I think I have some observations, because when the coup events were happening, were unfolding, I was actually in Pakistan, and we are a couple of hours ahead than Turkey, so it was late here. But I think there were 3 or 4 things which gave out some, you can see, some signals of how things will happen or how different actors are are reacting. I think there is no doubt that the Western media and Western press, and some Western commentators, they were actually cheering for this coup attempt. There's no doubt about it, and we can clearly say that some rumors were also spread during that time. And I think there is this also shows us a little bit of relation between how certain Western circles, how they perceive the Turkish government, specifically Turkish president, and how they were happy with his possible removal because of the coup. And from the Gulf perspective, I mean, mixed baggage, because at that time, the Saudi relationship with Turkey was not really bad. And I remember, if I'm right, the Saudi Air Force jets, they were also possibly afterwards they went into the Idjalik well. So I think that at that moment, I mean, this is, to be honest, this is realist politics. If there had been, if the coup had succeeded, it would have damaged Turkey, not only politically, but also structurally. The state would have weakened, because
Omar, your voice comes and goes.
Strong retaliation from.
We cannot hear you very well, but
Okay.
Yes,
can you hear me now? Can you hear me better now?
Now better, yes.
Okay. So basically, I was just saying that if this coup attempt had been successful, it would have weakened the Turkish Republic. I think this is a very clear, you can say, observation, because there would have been retaliation from the people, unlike previous coup attempts in Turkey. I think that somebody was talking before, and I think that was a very fair point, that right now a lot of people, whether necessarily they are in line with this movement's ideology or not, but because it helps them to go against the current Turkish government, so they get along with this victimhood card, which these people often use in the US. But to be frank, I think that the issue of Fethullah Gulen has fell into the bigger trap of partisan politics within the U.S. So the current government in the U.S., I think it's just treating every other government which had good relationship with the Trump administration. They are just treating them in a negative way. And I think it's true for Turkey. It's to some extent true for Pakistan as well, true for many other countries. And this is a problem of the US, and I think that this problem will remain. But for Turkey, I think it's necessary that there is, and it is quite visible, that there is political consensus within the country that things have to be done democratically, and there is no more space for any such any such military attempts to derail the process, the government processes within the country. And in a way, it's a good example for the whole region and other countries as well. And also, it's good that finally there was a different outcome in Turkey after all such coup attempts, because we know this was not the first one. So now different branches of the Turkish Republic, they know and they understand and they respect their constitutional role. So I think that's the biggest positive out of it. And I think regional states, they would have taken advantage if it had succeeded, whether they were on good terms with the current government, President Erdogan government, or whether they were not, but they would have taken advantage, because right now, whether you like it or not, Turkey holds a certain political space within the region, and it has some strong constituencies who like Turkey, who like Turkish president. And in case if there had been instability within Turkey, they would have definitely taken advantage of it. I think, yeah, I will end my comments here.
Thank you, Omar. I think if the coup succeeded, we would have a colossal change in the region, where you have Turkey weakened and maybe like ineffective, like Egypt became very weak after the coup, and Turkey would become very weak, and you would see Turkey is resisting now the division of Syria, division of Iraq. Turkey also resisted Qatar embargo, resisted Kurdish referendum and Barzani referendum in a way in northern Iraq, and this meant the division of Iraq. Probably the Turkey would be also divided if the coup plotters failed, and the coup plotters in two respects. First, they are like puppets. They do their sponsor what the sponsors tell them. But secondly, also because they are weakened, like Bashir Sudan, they would accept the division of Turkey. Also would be very, very dangerous. So would not be very effective in Syria. Maybe Syria would be divided and also fight against terror and PKK. And I see it more like a destructive Emirati policies. If Turkey were under the Gülenist control, would be like Emirates' destructive regional policies. So it has serious implications internally and externally, but I think this group was almost like destroyed. Of course, there are maybe still hidden cells and maybe disguising themselves, but the backbone of this group was crushed, and still the persecution is going on. And also, they're exploring new members, new hidden members inside the Turkish bureaucracy. The fight is going on inside and outside Turkey, also bringing these Gülenist leaders, especially to justice from different countries. And also recovering the Turkish schools that they established before in Turkey's name, and they worked against Turkey, and now Turkey is also convincing countries to give them to Turkish government, which is responsible from them is the Ma'arif Foundation. So it has, I think it was a historic event that this coup attempt failed, and with the Turkish people's bare hands, and personally also I participated with my family to protest against the coup plotters, also with social media for the injustice of this event. And even though, you know, many of our speakers fell off from the discussion, I think it was a useful discussion, and I hope that the listeners also enjoyed it. And I also thank the listeners, but especially the speakers that was contributing to this discussion, and especially in the English-speaking world, the Gülenist group or the organization is not understood very well. Even the Islamic circles, sometimes they see it as a normal religious group, but it is not. It is a Batinite religious group that and assigns different meanings to what the normal Muslims think. They don't interpret it the same way. In any case, this is an interesting case, and will continue. I think will be very significant. Turkey's fight against this group, this Gülenist organization, terrorist organization, because they killed. But Hilal Hanım, she just joined us, and we were closing, but we may hear a couple of sentences before we close. Hilal Hanım, welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. I'm so sorry I'm late because just as I was up and I had to attend to him. Just a couple of words. I think
But we cannot hear your voice very clearly. Could you change the location or?
Sorry.
Yes, go ahead. Maybe it's better now.
Is it better now?
I think it's better, but we'll see.
Okay. Okay. I think the main thing that Turkey's message to the international world about this terror organization is the fact that it is a terror organization. It is a terror organization in the organization that looks like
Hilal Hanım, Hilal Hanım. We discussed the nature of this group extensively, but we were short on how the failure affected domestic and also international politics for Turkey. If you want to focus on that aspect, would be very, very, very meaningful, but you are free, of course. If they succeeded, for example, what would happen if when they failed? How it is affected Turkey's?
If they succeeded,
yes.
we would not be a republic anymore. We would not be a democratic country anymore, because, as you know, and like I said, it is in the organization of a cult, which has intelligence figures in it. It has a very complex network. For instance, in any regular coup, the low-ranking soldiers get their commands from high-ranking soldiers. In July 15th, the soldiers, the high-ranking soldiers, got their commands from a lecturer of theology, a real estate agent, and a businessman. As you know, I'm referring to the Akıncı Air Base, the headquarters of the coup. So Turkey would be governed by this structure, no matter who you are, whether you're a soldier, whether you're a teacher, whether you are just a normal civil servant, you would be governed by people who should not give you orders. And Turkey in general would cease to be a democracy anymore. That's step one. Step two, I think Turkey would have a problem at its southern borders, especially from Syria and Iraq. And I'm referring to the danger of Daesh and YPG along our borders. As you know, Turkey acted very fastly 1.5 months after the coup to go into Syria, start its operations there, and cleared its borders in almost 1 year, both from Daesh and also YPG. But this would not be the case if the coup was successful. Turkey would have to also seize its influence in the Balkans, in Africa, in Far East. So it would be a country, again, like Turkey. If you remember Turkey in 90s, it was a country that did not have its own foreign policy, its own foreign policy agenda. It was like a satellite state that follows the path that is put forward in front of it from NATO and EU. That would be the same case if the coup was successful. So in many regards, when you look at the result of the coup, the failed coup, it became another hope for the region, not only for Middle East or for Syrians in our country, but also in general, from the Balkans to Eurasia. For instance, Turkey would not able to intervene in any way in the Karabakh conflict if the coup was successful.
Hilal Hanım, if you imagine the Gülenists are cooperating with the Armenian lobby in the West, especially in America. Can you imagine they do any support or provide any support to Azerbaijan against Armenians? Is it possible? Is it would be any
Turkey would be a state that is only interested in its internal politics. But when I say internal politics, I do not mean in the interest of Turkish people. I mean in the interest of the Gülenist terror group. And in the international area, Turkey would not be able to dare to do anything, let alone intervene in a conflict that has been going on for 3 decades.
Yes.
They would not be interested.
Yes, because they are like acting like a proxy and serving other interests, and this causing, of course, a big weakness in the state system. And glad that they failed, but if they succeeded, Turkey would be failed. You would see a failed Turkey. And because they failed now, Turkey is succeeding and achieving better than their control in fighting against terror and also deciding for themselves, not listening to impositions or dictations especially from the Western camp.
Exactly. I mean, to put it very simply, we would be like a country that is governed by an American governor, to be frank. Because, as you know, Gülen movement's face is very much turned to the US. It is no coincidence that the head of this group and all the major so-called high-ranking terrorists living in the United States. It is no coincidence, and it would be like Turkey would not be governed by its own people. That's what I meant when I said we would not be a republic or a democracy anymore.
Yes, I mean, you can imagine, this group is kind of a very, actually, very exclusionist in a way. If you have a problem with, let's say, a Gülenist businessman, let's say one ordinary businessman and a Gülenist businessman, he would bring a police that is supportive of him. He would bring prosecutor, judge, or even like sometime maybe a maliye or finance official, especially when the Gülenists, they demanded donation from a businessman. If he resisted, they would send him the finance or tax officials to punish him. So it is like a holistic institution that is not very much understood outside, and it's very dangerous. And assume you have a case with a Gülenist in any part of life or any affair, that you would be in trouble, because they always find themselves find somebody to support them, and they have hidden members or also open members. But one good thing I think happened is that they are normally a secretive, hidden organization, but they became so confident in a period after the Ergenekon case, etc. They became overconfident, and they revealed most of their members. Before, you wouldn't know. Even sometimes the Gülenists, they didn't know who is another Gülenist. For example, they had this fragmented or compartmentalized type of organization. One university, let's say, have a Gülenist, another university has other Gülenists also, but they would not know each other. They have kind of cell type of organization, but they became confident. They thought they already won, and they don't expect such kind of resistance and reaction from the Turkish public and Turkish government. We have Dr. Fatih Tuna. We were going to close, but maybe take 2-3 more minutes. Dr. Fatih, he's also a political scientist. He may want to add some comments on the impact of their failure on Turkish politics. Dr. Fatih, go ahead, please.
Hello to everyone. I have to say I'm using this application first time, actually, just saw you. And the question was, if they succeeded, what would have happened, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I think, firstly, the country would lose its being a state features. That's in my opinion, would be the first thing to say. After that, as Hilal Hanım just stated many important things, we would lose all the benefits or, experience of democracy has been going on for so long, and our country is fighting for it after every 10 years having so many coup attempts, or most of them have succeeded, even, 1960, 70, and 80, as you know. And we would lose as a country, as I say, independent states features totally would be gone. Plus, in my opinion, we would lose so many generations going along with the future, really. And this is since the 1962 was successful. Since then, there was ongoing coup tradition every 10-15 years. So that would have been continued. And that would keep Turkey as a country, the league of the country would be totally dropped down. And this success of Turkish people with the leader, of course, gave us so much strength for the future, really. And the benefit of winning this battle for Turkish people, the first time in the world, I think, this type of coup attempt, the way that we did that, 2016, is an example also for other countries that coup attempt can be stopped. But this coup attempt, who did it, as again Hilal Hanım stated, the nature of it was so different than the others because their route, the way they've been planning so many years, decades actually, and the implementation of it, the way they did it, everything was so different than the usual coup attempt in the past we had. So
your voice comes and goes. Yes. We cannot hear you very well, but barely.
What should I do?
What should I do? Maybe choose.
Have I been understood?
Yes. You're understood mostly, but in the last couple of words that we were missing. Anyway, any last points before we close? Akkas Bey, İbrahim Bey, Omar, Hilal Hanım, Mehmet Bey. Maybe, yes, go ahead, Hilal Hanım.
I mean, the point that you made about how repressive and how coward they are. I mean, it depends on their strategy, because as you know, Gülen states that there are sleeping cells that can be woken up when the time is right. We saw that the so-called journalists and the prosecutors and officials in the police force became very apparent in December 17 and 25 operations. But after that, they kind of tried to hide themselves. But for instance, I want to give an example about how they are denying to death when it's necessary. There was the trial. There was an incident that took place during the trial of FETÖ affiliated soldiers who attempted to kill President Erdogan by raiding his hotel. And during that trial, the prosecutor was reading the charges against FETÖ leader Fethullah Gülen. The defendants, the ex-soldiers, covered their ears until the prosecutor was done reading the charges. But when you ask them, they say that they are not Gülenists. I mean, they are so Gülenist to the core that they cover their ears so that they can't hear the charges, but then they continue denying that they are Gülenists. So this is the case that we have to tell to the international world, how it is formed as a cult, but is more than just a cult, to the point that they are a terrorist organization. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. So far, we haven't seen very few kind of give concessions and show regrets, because these, especially top officials in the group, they were going through like different tests, and their loyalty is to the group is more than anything, more than the country, the flag, the religion. They even to legitimize or justify their, for example, we had a very secularist military. To disguise themselves in the military, they were even allowed to drink alcohol, etc. And people can drink alcohol or not, it's their decision. But as a religious group, they say they are an Islamic group, and they giving fatwas to even the major forbidden issues. And any other comments? And before we close, İbrahim Bey, Vakkas Bey, Mehmet Bey. I think we are over 2 hours, and it was a very, very valuable discussion, and we will broadcast this as a YouTube program also. If you miss the first part, you can find it in my YouTube channel also. Thanks for your contributions inside and outside Turkey, and have a nice day. We will continue to discuss these, especially the Middle Eastern issues. The coup is a global issue. The Gülenis has a coup. I mean, it's affecting inside and outside and the region. That's why we spent some time on the coup these couple of days in Arabic. Yesterday we had a discussion in Arabic. Today we have a discussion in English, but I think we need more informing efforts to the Western public that's especially blinded by the Gülenis propaganda. As I said again, most of the literature, academic literature in English, are sponsored literature. I mean, sponsored with the master thesis, PhD thesis, or books, etc., are sponsored by the Gülenis. Very few you can find objective studies, but there are some objective studies. But in Turkish, there are many books now that's explaining the real nature of this Gülenis terrorist organization that's killed our people, more than 200 people, and injured around 3,000 people. And this is not joke. This is not a theater, because we were in the streets and we were shot at, and many people died and were injured. And imagine the after the coup failed, the one who bombed the people next to the presidential palace in Ankara, the F-16 pilot, he knew it's over, but still he was so angry and so desperate, maybe blinded. He shot at people and killed like 5-6 people there, just next to the presidential palace, that are supportive of the democracy and see their motivation and their boldness and blindness, but they are also covered. So we tested them and they failed. And thanks to everybody, and thanks for your patience. It was a long discussion, and have a nice day, have a nice evening.